Delegation from AfriForum and Solidarity has held surprise talks at the White House with officials from the Trump administration. The delegation was led by the Solidarity chairperson, Flip Byers, as well as the CEO, Dirk Herrman, AfriForum CEO Kallie Kriel, as well as the head of the lobby group's International Liaison, Jaco Kleynhans. The four men have urged the U.S. to punish President Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC for what they call government's discriminatory racial legislation. But they've also appealed to the Trump administration not to revoke South Africa's trading privileges under the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA. Newzroom Afrika's Washington correspondent, Simon Marks, says news of the delegation's visit came as a complete surprise.
This was a bolt from the blue. We had known that there were plans for AfriForum and its affiliated organisations to send a delegation here, but neither the White House nor the visiting South Africans provided any advance information about their presence in Washington, D.C., and we still do not know precisely who they met. It's clear they entered the White House on Tuesday from pictures of the four men on social media standing right outside the main guest entrance to the building on Pennsylvania Avenue, all of them wearing visitor passes needed to enter the building. In a statement, they called their encounter with Trump officials historic, and they expressed their thanks for the president's decision to, in their words, highlight the human rights violations against Afrikaners, the ANC's reckless policies and poor governance in South Africa. They say they presented Trump officials with a document called the Washington Memorandum. It calls on the United States government to intensify pressure on President Ramaphosa and other ANC leaders. But the delegation argues that pressure campaign should not include efforts to revoke South Africa's crucial trading privileges under AGOA, that some Republicans on Capitol Hill support suspending. The Expropriation Act, of course, was at the centre of conversations, and the document presented to Trump officials contains details of what the delegation called the wide scope of discriminatory racial legislation in South Africa. Dr. Dirk Herrman of Solidarity insisted the current rupture in US-South Africa relations is not just a minor diplomatic understanding, but a diplomatic crisis that he says has been caused by the ANC. From the White House itself, there was no news of the delegation's impact on President Trump's determination to continue punishing South Africa. He has already received a letter from four Republicans on Capitol Hill urging him to consider suspending diplomatic relations between the two countries.
Well, Mark says that the delegation became the first group of South Africans to visit the White House since President Trump and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, indicated their opposition to the Expropriation Act and South Africa's stance on Israel.
Well, there's no question that this group, representing many of South Africa's white farmers, have stolen a march on government. It's been days now since the presidency announced plans for a government delegation to travel here to Washington, D.C. in a bid to explain the details of the Expropriation Act to President Trump and his top officials, and to push back on the president's false claims that expropriation of white farmers without compensation is already taking place in South Africa. But that government delegation has not materialized here. Indeed, reports last week indicated that the South African embassy here and Durco in Pretoria were finding it very difficult to make contact with Trump insiders. The mere fact that this delegation was able to travel to Washington, access the White House, and meet with figures from the Trump administration reflects the fact that powerful figures who oppose South Africa's government continue to have access to President Trump's ear. No meeting with the South African delegation was included on the president's publicly distributed schedule, and reporters have no access to transparency over Elon Musk's daily activities. But whether the delegation met with them or with lower-level officials in the White House, they still beat government to the punch. And that is likely only to put additional pressure on the presidency to take action quickly in an effort to get government's side of the story in front of America's president.